ensayas rápido, no te sabes poner pie. Lo ensayas rápido, no te sabes poner pie.
Welcome back to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
And I'm Paul Ogden. Mark, it looks like rain outside.
Oh, yes. Well, we've been going through a heat wave here in Indianapolis. This is June 30th, 2012. And our fans are here watching the show live. We've gone through a horrendous heat wave. It was like 104 degrees on Thursday. Yesterday, it was...
How much rain did we get last night? Because I thought it rained a lot.
I thought it was about an inch and a half over the course of the night.
That's what I thought it was an inch. But then I made a joke that now I got to mow my yard on Facebook, and someone responded back, "Oh, that trace of rain won't make that much difference." I thought it was a heck of a lot more than a trace.
It was more than a trace, but it's been so dry here. We're under severe drought conditions that the earth sucked that moisture up, and the plants sucked it up, and it went down 20 degrees in about 10 minutes last night.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, I thought it was going to be tornado weather because you get a rapid drop in temperatures in this part of the country. That means normally you've got some twisters coming in, and then you could end up in Oz surrounded by a bunch of drunken short people being praised as some kind of god or something. But that's a different movie. And everything goes from black and white to color. I just don't know. We're talking about student debt and student loans. The second segment, we were talking about the costs of education, but the costs now have gotten so high that, and states have cut back support for universities or colleges such that a lot of students are having to take out loans, or they're taking out more in loans than they used to.
Speaking of rain, it is raining now. So anyway, how much they've cut back on education, I don't know on college, because I hear that all the time. I hear, oh, we're cutting education. Yet you look at K through 12, which I am more experienced with K through 12. The trend line is always up. We always spend more, and it's gone up way above the inflation rate. So I'm not convinced that we're funding college a lot less. I think it's the spike in the cost, that the costs continue to go up. Tuition continues to go up well above the inflation rate. And I think that's the problem. I think that's the lack of control over the cost.
Well, and we have something like over $1 trillion in student loan debt in this country. And the primary holders of that debt are the company that owns the Discover card, Wells Fargo, J.P. Morgan Chase, Sallie Mae, whose CEO has made so much money off of student loans, like $220.
Sallie Mae is a quasi-governmental agency. It's not strictly private.
Well, I know, but when the CEO makes $250 million, I think that's more than quasi. He was able to build his own private golf course, own personal private golf course. Those are the people who are holding the student debt. And so when we talk about people getting out of school, they have to pay these student loans. So that's money, first of all, that's not going to any other segment of the economy. It's going strictly to retirement of that debt for that student loan. So it means they're not putting that money into the local economy, buying a car, going to the theater, going to a restaurant, buying clothes, doing anything like that. They're not enjoying an improved quality of life because they're repaying the student loan to Wells Fargo or Citibank. All that money is going to those loan holders, and I think that
how much student loan are we talking about?
$1 trillion.
Okay, well, let's break that down if you have the numbers. The average person graduates college.
The average person graduates college. The extreme is the 100,000. In 1993, it states about 2% of students at nonprofit private colleges took on, in other words, not online, took on more than $50,000 in 2008 in debt. In 2008, it was 8.6%. Half of all indebted students owe less than $12,500. It's according to an article in The Atlantic. But if you look, 90% owe less than $50,000.
And I thought I saw the figure someplace. I was looking through my papers that the average person graduates with $27,000 worth of debt.
That would sound about right.
And also, too, something we talked about off the air, which I'm not as familiar with. A lot of these students are taking out credit cards and running up debt, maybe to pay books and other things. So,
Well, and that's one thing that I think is totally irresponsible, is anybody letting a college student have a credit card. I mean, but I remember
beer and pizza, Mark.
That's what bad checks are for. But I remember seeing that on the bulletin boards, and I thought it was only peculiar to law school, although law school is peculiar. There would be these notices up for credit cards, and I thought, this is silly. It was like when I was in college, it was get 12 albums for a penny. That's Columbia House Record Club. But they're running up credit card debt. See, that's dischargeable in bankruptcy,
Right.
generally.
It's true.
Somebody can file bankruptcy and wipe that out, or you'd know more about that. I don't do Chapter 7s.
One of the things that's been pointed out about student loan debt, why these companies like it so much, is it's not dischargeable. You also don't have some of the same protections that you have with regard to other consumer debt. One of the things that happens a lot of times, people come out of college, can't get a job, and they will defer the debt. And they think, well, I'm putting off paying this debt, but the interest continues to accumulate. And some of these people start out with $25,000 in debt, and a few years later, they graduate with $25,000 in debt, and they graduate and defer it for a year or so, and then they have $40,000 in debt. So,
And Wells Fargo is jumping on that. It's now offering a new fixed-rate private student loan, which would allow borrowers to lock in one rate for the life of their loan. However, the rates can be high, up to 14%. So you have people that get really locked in, and all of a sudden they accumulate this huge debt. Now, there are ways of getting around this. One is, and I was not aware of this until this week, that Indiana has a provision, and don't take my word for it, but Google it or use some other search engine to look this up. But Indiana apparently has a statute, or so I was told, for loan forgiveness if an individual is employed in a public sector job that is for the public benefit. I would have to look that up myself, but people can check that out. Other states might have similar provisions, or there might be federal statutes that come along that provide loan forgiveness for people who are in public sector jobs. That and I think you have to have 10 years in continual service in order to obtain that kind of relief. But
10 years straight.
It's 10 years straight.
Right.
But I'm looking at the people that are holding all this debt. They're not people, they're large corporations, and they have over $1 trillion in debt that's really screwing up our economy, and they just got a $7 trillion Benny from the taxpayers. I say that it wouldn't be too wrong. Wipe out the student debt. Why not?
Well, one of the things that would have done is to, and one of the arguments is that would put the money in the pockets of individuals, as opposed to what we did with the bailouts, putting the money into the banks, for example.
Yeah, where it's still
Where and then they said, okay, we're not going to give this money out.
Yeah, I mean, but okay. First of all, it stayed with the banks. Either that, or went to the individuals who run the banks, so that they could go out and spend it wherever they. Whereas these would be individuals who are middle class, and they are more likely to spend locally and spend it directly on things that they need, like clothes and cars and housing.
And that actually is an argument that I think was a better argument for the bailout of the mortgage industry and the banks. Instead of paying the banks because they made all these bad loans, let's use the money to help people out with their mortgages.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, screw the banks. Let's just go ahead and give the money to the people, because these students are they've gotten suckered into, like, law school. Law school runs up tremendous debt, or medical school. And I don't like doctors necessarily. I really don't. But these schools will tell people, especially law schools, oh, we've got a 92% employment rate,
Right.
and you're going to make a whole bunch of money as a partner in a firm. That doesn't happen anymore because partnership tracks no longer exist as such in most settings for law firms. They realized that they could go ahead and hire people as independent contractors or just hire them as employees and not give them a share of the partnership that the partners have worked so hard for all these years. It used to be that was a rite of passage. Now they realize that they can go ahead and keep the whole pie for themselves and hire lawyers as employees. So these people have gone into graduate schools, they've gone into professional schools with the belief that they were going to make a lot of money and counted on that in terms of the debt that they've run up, and then they get out of school and they realize they're not going to be making that money.
I believe Indiana Tech, the new law school they're talking about bringing online in Indiana, to be the 5th law school. I think their tuition they talked about, it's going to be about $35,000 a year. This will be a school that is often referred to as a lower tier law school, which means academically it may not be as good as IU, Indianapolis, IU, Bloomington, certainly not as good as Harvard. So the students coming out are going to have a little more difficulty finding jobs.
And as it is right now, Northwestern University School of Law published their employment figures last year or for 2 years ago, and their employment figures were 64% of the graduates from 2009 or 2010. 64% of Northwestern University School of Law's graduates were employed in a job that required a law license. In some of the law schools will say we have 100% employment of our graduates.
But they're working at McDonald's.
But yeah, they're literally.
Right.
And so the accurate way of determining whether they're placing their law school graduates in law schools or in law jobs is if that job requires a law degree or a bar license and passing the bar. And a lot of times a law degree can be an impediment.
Exactly. It can overqualify you for jobs. The law school statistics, one thing I want to speak on is law schools are rated by their employment, in part by their employment numbers, how many people they get employed within 9 months, and what kind of salaries they get. The problem is there's no audit of those numbers. So those schools have been competing against each other in terms of who can tell the biggest lie.
And then actually the American Bar Association Journal just covered that in part, and that there have been revisions of numbers, and schools have been rather embarrassed by what they've had to do. But also what plays into the rankings is the quality of the facility in terms of numbers of books in the library. That's almost irrelevant anymore because we're online.
Right. I glossed over too quickly. But a lot of people go to law school, and I did because I thought I would use my law degree in another area. But they don't understand that it overqualifies you for jobs. It pigeonholes you into legal slots, and you aren't able to move into other professions.
And people just see you as a lawyer, and that's once they see the law degree.
Yeah,
and you might not be a lawyer because you didn't pass the bar. We're at the end of the third segment. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.